Hey everyone, my name is Tristan and welcome to my workshop. In this video, I'm gonna show you how you can make your own parrot hat from Sea of Thieves. This one is the regular parrot hat, but if you paint it differently, you can make the sunshine or nightshine parrot hat. If you want to make one for yourself, the templates are available over on my Etsy store for pretty cheap, along with many others. But now let's not waste any time and get right into the build. Here are the templates you'll need to build this project. This is the brim of the hat, and you'll have to separate the 18 and 15mm details before tracing the piece onto EVA foam. I started by tracing the three main pieces on EVA foam using a Sharpie. Then, using a hobby knife and a box cutter, I carefully cut out those pieces. This piece will be the top of the hat, and it needs inward angle cuts on all sides. And this piece also needs inward angle cuts on all sides but one. As you can see, there's a couple vertical lines on this piece, each of them indicates a corner. To achieve that effect, I flipped the piece and cut V-grooves on each of the lines. A V-groove consists of cutting halfway through the foam on one side of the line at a 45-degree inward angle, then flipping the piece around and doing the same thing on the other side. You should be able to peel off a strip of foam from your part and be left with a nice V-groove, which lets you fold the piece inwards. Once you've done this on all the lines, you should be able to fold this piece on itself while still having flat faces. It's time to finish the brim, and first I cut off the trim that goes around the piece and I separate it into three parts to make the cutting and assembly process easier. Then I cut out two of each of the three pieces out of 2mm foam. Now let's glue those trim pieces on the brim, and for that I like to use contact cement. The way contact cement works is you apply a thin layer on both parts you want to glue together, then wait until the glue gets tacky, and finally firmly stick those pieces together for an instant and strong bond. As you can see, I also added the trim to the underside of the hat. Because I didn't glue my edges totally flush, I had to use my rotary tool to do some cleanup all around the hat. Once that's done, I used a box cutter to cut out the gashes on the hat. All of them are indicated on the templates. And finally, I rounded the edges all around the hat using once again my rotary tool. And I think the brim's looking pretty good. Now let's cut out those thicker detail pieces. Because the thickest foam I have is 10mm, I had to stack multiple pieces to achieve the 15 and 18mm thicknesses those parts require, and I simply cut them out using my box cutter. I also decided to round off all their edges with the rotary tool. And finally, they were glued on to the brim using contact cement. Now let's make the top of the hat by gluing together those two pieces. But first I cut out a triangular piece of foam to go around the underside of the top piece. This will give us more thickness to carve into later to get the 45-degree drop from the top of the hat. Now just glue the two parts together and close the seam on the bigger piece. This is what you should end up with. As you can see, the hat in the game has an angled drop from the top of the hat to the side. To get that, I'll just carve into the foam using a box cutter. Try to keep your cuts as clean as possible to have less cleanup to do later. When I was done, I glued in strips of 2mm foam inside the hat to reinforce the parts that got too thin because of the carving. Of course, I cleaned up the piece using my rotary tool and then moved on to a sanding stick to make the surface even smoother. Finally, I heat sealed the surface and heat formed the top of the hat into a slight dome shape. Now it's finally time to glue the top of the hat to the brim. Make sure you line up the front edges together. This is what you should end up with. This is a detail that should only be visible from the underside of the hat. I start by tracing it on the brim using the template piece. Then I cut it out with a box cutter and replaced the 6mm piece with a 4mm piece. Then I flip the hat, apply super glue to the pieces, and glue it flush with the top side of the hat. As you can see, it's still visible from the top side, but we'll fix that right now. First, I use sanding sponges to sand down the excess glue and make the edges flush. Then I apply flexible filler over the part and smooth it out with water. While I have the filler out, I also apply it to the part we carved out earlier to make it even smoother. After applying 2 layers of filler and waiting a couple of hours, I use a sanding stick and a sanding sponge to smooth out the last imperfections in the filler. This is another detail that is on the underside of the hat. I cut it out of 5mm foam and rounded off the edges. Then I simply glued it on using contact cement. This part is made from 4 and 6mm foam, and the edges also got rounded on this one. It gets glued on the front of the hat, close to the top. Now let's make the band. I cut this piece out of 8mm foam, rounded off the edges and cut a gash into it. Then all you need to do is close up the back with contact cement and glue it on the hat. I used hot glue for that, and I only applied glue to the front 3 panels. This is very important for later. Now you can just slip on the band and that's it. The hat has bends on each corner, so I had to heat up the brim of the hat and fold the corners one at a time until they cooled. When I was done, the result looked pretty cool. To make the feathers, I first traced down each template piece on 2mm foam. Then to make the stem, I glued on electrical wires on the back of the pieces, trying to keep them centered on the feather. After that, I applied contact cement on the back of the feathers and on more 2mm foam, and I finally stuck them on to embed the wire inside. Of course, I then cut out the feathers following the lines I traced earlier. And I'm pretty happy with the result. Here's a look at the hat, all finished and ready for paint. I'll show you how to glue the feathers once everything is painted. First, you need to seal the foam. To get a super easy smooth finish, I applied 2 coats of black Plastidip on all my pieces. Once the Plastidip is dry, I start by applying a coat of gray acrylic paint on the feathers as a primer for the next colors. The feathers are blue and green, so I start with 2 coats of blue on all the feathers and I don't cover them to the top since the green will cover that part. Now let's apply the green. I also do 2 coats and I try to get a gradient from the green to the blue. Finally, I protect my work with 1 coat of satin clear coat. It ended up being way too glossy and the feathers got a coat of matte clear later. Now let's paint the hat. As you can see, it already got a coat of gray like the feathers earlier. The first color to apply is a dark red. I ended up applying 2 coats. Then the band needed to be yellow, and after applying a couple coats by hand and getting 0 coverage, I taped up everything and applied a coat of yellow spray paint I had from a previous project. The inset detail under the hat also got a coat of yellow. To protect my work, I also applied a good coat of matte clear coat over the hat and over the feathers to get rid of the glossiness. Then I taped up everything that was already painted and applied the final color, which is gold. I sprayed it on after the matte clear coat because this gold paint doesn't take a clear coat. Once the gold is dry, I decided to do some shading with black paint. I would normally use my airbrush for this, but not everybody has one, so I wanted to show you that you can do it by hand. All you need is to apply the paint in the corners with your brush and then wipe off the excess paint using a paper towel but following the direction of the edges. I used this technique on all the details and edges of the hat. Here's how I glued the feathers to the hat. First, line them up using the number order on the templates, then stack them up in this order. First is number 4, then number 5, then number 3, followed by number 1, and finally number 2. But as you can see, I placed them so they're all in order from left to right. Now simply connect them all using duct tape. This way they won't move out of order. During the painting process, the hat lost its shape a bit, so I quickly heat formed it back into shape. The final step is to add hot glue at the back of the hat behind the yellow band, and I simply slide the feathers into place. And now you should have your own Sea of Thieves parrot hat. So this is the final result and I really like it. The colors are a bit brighter than in the game, but I like it better this way. Unfortunately, I can't put it on because I made it for a friend whose head is bigger than mine and I had to scale up the templates a bit. As I said at the start of the video, the templates to make this hat are available over on my Etsy store for pretty cheap along with many others. And if you want to see more of what I do, things that don't always make it into my videos, you can go follow me on Instagram. All the links will be in the description. But now this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more cool stuff like this. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.